Back up and running on this blessed time to be a Philadelphia sports fan, that's for sure. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Barrett's working out the kinks in the shoulder. He's getting ready to go, man. You all right?
Bro, I need to get surgery on my shoulder, man. I'm about 2 years. They told me 2 years ago I needed to. I thought I could rehab back. So I left them alone. I'll lift on them hard for about 6 weeks. No, I lift them hard for 3 weeks and have to be off 6 weeks. Lift hard 3 weeks, off 6 weeks. It's
not working. All those years of carrying D Gun has finally taken its toll, man.
What?
What? Did I say that out loud?
Really? All right. You know what? Sorry. You know what? After we get, let me just give you both warning.
There we go.
After we get rid of our guest, Sielski and Ricky Bo, it's open season. That's it.
Well, then I better go to Mike right away before I catch any shrapnel.
I'm telling you right now.
The one and only extraordinary columnist from the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Sielski. And Mike, I love, by the way, great story today on Schwarber, but your tweet, your preview tweet of the story. Some people said the Phillies shouldn't have had Kyle Schwarber be their leadoff hitter all season. Some people are dumb. A column on their dumbness.
That's what it's about, Rob. And Barrett, just on the topic of your shoulder, let this be a lesson to you. Never work out. Ever.
Yes.
For any reason. Okay. That way you don't get injured and everything is cool.
My shoulders feel great. That's not a coincidence.
Don't let him fool you, man. The only workout he's doing is lifting a White Castle burger, doing that. That's his curls. That's his curls for the day.
Gunner, I think open season has already begun. You don't have to wait for me and Ricky.
You didn't even wait for Mike to get off.
Yeah. Here's the thing, Mike. For the last 3 weeks, I've been preaching to these guys that D-Gun is in a happier place.
You have
they just pick. And I said, you know what? You can't get to me. Well, today, Rob set the tone. Barrett chimed in, and I said, you know what? It's time for D-Gun's alter ego to come back.
I'm telling you.
So here's the thing, though, Gunner. If you had spent the last 3 weeks talking to me about yourself in the third person, I'd be picking at you too. Just saying.
Yes, it's becoming more commonplace too, Mike. That's the scary thing. It's Mike, it's not occasionally.
I just try to be a nicer guy, and they won't let me, Mike.
Poor guy.
Just trying to keep you down, brother. I feel you. I feel you.
D-Gun's got to do what D-Gun's got to do. When your boss says that to you one day, you know it's gone. It's gone.
And now D-Gun is back.
All right, he's back.
Oh man.
So, Mike, I want to start with this before we get to your Schwarber piece, which was excellent. Look, you're an historian here. You know, you have perspective on what's gone down in this city. This run, let's start with how improbable it is, because about 15 different things had to break right, including changing the rules for the wild card, DH, being universal, all that. But just the atmosphere during this run, because you've been there covering a lot of these games, where does it rank in terms of the craziness?
Rob, I'm telling you, I was there throughout 2008. I was there throughout 2009. That ballpark is louder now than it was then. I really believe that. Last night was nuts. And what's cool about it, if you're a Phillies fan, I have to imagine, is that there are all these moments, usually brought on by Bryce Harper, where you kind of say to yourself, man, what if he hit a home run here? That'd be kind of cool. And then he hits a home run there. It happened in Game 5 against the Padres. I was sitting next to my colleague, David Murphy, in the press box. And I almost said, man, this is why you signed this guy. And then he hits the home run to left field and puts the Phillies in front. And Dave and I just kind of looked at each other like, oh, my God, can you believe he just did that? And then we did exactly the same thing last night in the first inning after he homered off McCullers. It's the improbability of the run. It's the fact that this team, personality-wise, I think connects with the city pretty well. You go back to those teams in 08 and 09, the fans had a chance to watch the core of that team develop. They had seen Rollins, Utley, Howard, Hamels mature over time and grow up. This team kind of hasn't been like that. Big signing of Bryce Harper, obviously, signing Kyle Schwarber, signing Nick Castellanos, kind of a mixture of guys, but the town has taken to them. And I think the final piece of the puzzle here, obviously, is that this town was starved to have good baseball to watch. And now you're watching, Really, really, really good baseball, and a team with an explosive offense that makes it exciting to go to the park. As you said, Rob, I think it's just a combination of a ton of factors that have made this just a remarkable run to watch and be a part of.
Mike, I'm glad you said remarkable run, because under that category of remarkable, we can't emphasize enough that if Major League Baseball doesn't expand the playoff format, they're not even in the playoffs.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
It really is. I mean, you kind of forget that, Gunnar, because we had talked about this team all year. If you really paid attention, and I think that's another factor we're looking at, like fans were waiting for the right time to kind of give themselves over to these guys, to really believe in them. And that they needed to be, the team needed to prove it to the fan base that they were going to be a force to be reckoned with. But the thinking always was, boy, if these guys ever hit all at once, or if Nola and Wheeler, you had to face them in a short playoff series, they might be tough. And then they get the last playoff spot, and all those things that everybody thought might make the Phillies a tough out in the postseason have made them an incredibly tough out in the postseason. And then you layer onto that atmosphere at that ballpark. Honestly, guys, I have never seen anything like this, where a crowd is that engaged from pitch to pitch, that loud pitch to pitch, and you can see the effect it has on the other team. I think we can overstate home field advantage or home court advantage or home ice advantage in sports a lot. You cannot overstate it in this situation. You can see it affecting the Braves and the Padres and the Astros. Lance McCullers Jr. looked like he had ticks out there last night. He looked nervous, and whether he was or he wasn't, it didn't matter. He gave up 5 home runs.
No, it was unbelievable. Go ahead, Doc.
I was going to say, how do we get this? What made John Middleton go out and sign Schwarber and Castellanos and, go over the luxury tax and be totally in with this year as opposed to years prior? What made him just take this, all right, this notion, all right, I got to field a better team?
Well, first of all, hiring Dave Dombrowski, who's he's an all-time great GM, has taken the Florida Marlins, the Detroit Tigers, the Boston Red Sox, all to the World Series, won championships with the Marlins and the Red Sox. He's like Pat Gillick part 2, basically. And there's that. And Dombrowski, is known for this. He's known for taking a team that's pretty close and making moves to put that team over the top. And to answer your question, Barrett, I think John Middleton, since he became the Phillies managing partner, pretty much has been impatient about wanting to get back to the World Series and win a championship, and has been willing to do whatever his baseball people have told him to try to do. You remember, I was the one who quoted him back in 2009 after they lost to the Yankees in Game 6 of that World Series. He was kneeling in front of Ryan Howard, and he said, "That's our bleeping trophy, and I want it back." And that has been the guiding principle for him as a managing partner. And at first, it led him to following the advice of Andy McPhail and Matt Klentak and saying, we got to rebuild this thing. And after a while, that wasn't working. And then they've gone with Dombrowski's strategy of just go out and sign guys who can bash. And here we are. They have a lineup full of guys, none of whom is an easy out, none of whom is an automatic out. I mean, you've got Brandon Marsh hitting 2 big home runs in this postseason out of the 9 spot. That tells you all you need to know.
Well, Mike, stay on that theme for a minute. Castellanos with 3 incredible catches, one of which absolutely saved a game. The other one, I think in Atlanta, likely saved what would have been one of the all-time, just choke jobs in a game. And then last night completely sets the tone because Houston jumped all over the Phillies in Game 2. It looked like it was the same approach. Swing early and try and get something going. If that gets past him and it's a double or triple, who knows how Suarez pitches? Who knows how that whole game flips on its ear?
I love stuff like this, Rob. I mean, when baseball is interesting and exciting, I love stories like this. Like I watch Nick Castellanos making sliding catches in right field throughout this postseason, and I'm probably like you. Like my mind goes back to Kim Batiste in 1993 in the NLCS, where he's brought in to be a defensive replacement for Dave Hollins, and throws a ball away, throws a dead double play ball away. It looks like it's going to cost the Phillies a game, and then he goes and gets the game-winning hit in the bottom of the inning. And that's not why he was in the game. And it was the only at bat he had that entire postseason. I love stuff like this. And suddenly Nick Castellanos turning into the greatest defensive right fielder since Roberto Clemente is just an awesome, awesome story. And he was very funny and kind of self-effacing about it last night in the clubhouse after the game. He's like, he basically said, like, yeah, I'm paying attention more during the playoffs than I am during the regular season. Like in the regular season, I'm thinking about geopolitics and what I'm going to have for dinner tomorrow night and all this kind of stuff. And now I'm locked in pitch to pitch. He was tongue in cheek, but there was some truth to it.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, how concerned are you or should we be about Aaron Nola this postseason? Normally he had those dips in his performances in September where he rose to the occasion when he had to in September, but now it appears to have carried over into October. His last 2 outings have been less than Nola-esque, so to speak. Is there a genuine concern in what we're watching from him?
I'm a little nervous about tonight, Gunner, or at least I would be if I, were a huge Phillies fan and had something riding on this. Only because, as you said, the last 2 starts have not been great. Right. I kind of thought that start against the Padres in the NLCS was a function of him being too jacked up for the game. Maybe the idea of facing his brother. His velocity was up in that game. Like he was throwing 95 and 96 consistently, and that's not Aaron Nola generally through the regular season. And his location was off. And of course, his location was off again in Game 1 of the World Series. But here's the thing: the counterpoint to that is it's rare that Aaron Nola pitches 3 bad games in a row. Right. It just is, no matter what the time of the year. So you got to think that there's a good chance the Phillies are going to get really good Aaron Nola tonight.
Mike, let's go back to your piece on Schwarber, because it was a big debate really the entire season, and a lot of it was the old school people view it as you need your speedy leadoff guy. Set the table. He's going to steal a base, going to lay a bunt down, et cetera, hit for high average, high on base. That's not what he is. We know that. He's a basher, but they seem to feed off of this guy, and it's not just what he does necessarily between the lines. It's what he brings in the clubhouse as well. So just give me a gist of kind of what your piece for people who didn't maybe necessarily read it.
Sure. Well, I didn't even get into what he brings to them in the clubhouse and off the field. I mean, he's been a leader from day one. In fact, JT Realmuto said during the NLCS that take away what he does in the batter's box, he's been infinitely better for us, in the clubhouse as a leader, all of those things. But I asked Castellanos about this last night. Like, what does Schwarber give them at the top of the lineup with that combination of power and pitch selection? Because you're right, Rob. This debate had gone on all season. Why are they batting him leadoff? Why don't they hit him third? That way he'll come up with men on base and things like that. And Castellanos made a really good point. And I didn't include it in the column, but the guy he used as an example was D. Gordon, if you guys remember him. Yeah. Really good leadoff hitter for a number of years. He said there was really no threat that D. Gordon was ever going to hit a ball out of the ballpark, right? But he was fast and he could get on base if you weren't careful. So what would you do with D. Gordon leading off? What would a pitcher do? Probably pound him with fastballs. You don't want to walk him. You want to try to get him out, and you're not worried about him hitting a home run. So just throw fastball after fastball and take your chances. Well, you can't do that with Schwarber, right? You pound fastballs at him, he's going to hit one of them. He's going to hit one of them out of the park. So already the likelihood is that the entire lineup behind Schwarber is going to see the starting pitcher's entire repertoire in that at bat. Because Schwarber has such a good eye, and he's going to lock in on his pitch, and he's not going to chase anything if it's not something that he really wants to swing at. So look at that first at bat last night. He took McCullers to a 3-2 count and worked a walk, and 2 batters later, Bryce Harper hits a home run, and it's 2-0. And that kind of component out of the leadoff spot, to me, counteracts whether he can steal a base or whether he's going to hit a double or a triple. I mean, the guy hit 46 home runs this season. And then to that final point about, he never comes up with men on base. He came up with a man on last night and hit a home run. So, that happens too once in a while.
Yeah, that's just the start of just the start of this season. And, look at the roster that we have right now. I mean, Herrera's not here anymore. Moniak's not here anymore. This is like a totally different team that I don't even recognize this team from the start of the season. And to now, man, it's incredible the jump we have with the new manager and everything else, man. I mean, just comparing the two and how far they've gone, man, they did a miraculous job, man, just filling this roster right. I mean, we got Syndergaard coming up, tomorrow. This is totally different than what we had at the beginning.
Yeah, you generally have proven guys, Barrett. And I think what you're talking about comes down to something I said to somebody in the press box last night, late in the game, I forget what inning it was, an Astros player hit a really high, tricky fly ball to center field. And Brandon Marsh made a pretty good play on it. It was kind of shallow, kind of in between. You guys might remember it. It was kind of right where the second baseman or shortstop would have a really tough time with it. And Marsh ended up kind of catching it off to the side and struggling with it. But he made a good play on it. And I said to the guy next to me, I said, if Odubel Herrera had been the center fielder on that play, he'd have passed out. Like, he just wouldn't have been able to deal with it. And,
right.
Even little things like that go a long way. You know, Brandon Marsh has just kind of stabilized the outfield defense. He made a couple of good plays last night. You know, you see the strides that Alec Boehm has made at third base and how much better defensively he is now compared to what he was at the beginning of the season. And those are things that you can't quantify on paper, right? You can't say, well, we'll just take for granted that Alec Boehm will go from being terrible defensively to being average to above average, and it'll help us immeasurably come the playoffs. You don't plan for that kind of thing, but it happens, and here they are, 2 wins from a championship.
Hey, Mike, are you exclusively on baseball right now, or will you detour and head down to Houston to cover that game?
No, Marcus Hayes is heading down to Houston for us today. I'll be at the ballpark tonight and tomorrow night, and then I'll head to Houston if there is a Game 6. But I'll be honest, guys, you know, for my own sanity and just for the ease of my personal life, I would really love the Phillies to finish this thing off in 5 games.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, but how weird potentially is tomorrow night going to be, though? I mean, I think everybody hopes this happens, so you don't have to go. You don't, and nobody else has to go to Houston. But can you imagine they finish it off on a night when the Eagles are also playing? Like, that is so weird.
Isn't that something? Isn't that weird?
It's really weird. It's funny, though, Rob. John McClain, who has been just recently retired, like very famous football writer in the Houston area, a legendary writer, had a really good tweet the other day. It was last night. He said, if you think this is bad, meaning the Phillies-Astros game, wait until you see what the Eagles do to the Texans on Thursday night. And so maybe it's a situation for Philly sports fans. Again, nobody wants to get greedy and you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but maybe the Eagles jump out to a quick lead and everybody goes, okay, don't have to worry about that anymore. Turn off Amazon Prime, turn on Fox, and you're watching Game 5.
That would be nice. I got to ask you about the postseason that Harper's having. I said earlier, it reminds me of, Nick Foles in the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl, just almost untouchable what he's been doing. And you mentioned, it'd be what if Harper hits a home run here and boom, he does it. But he has carried this over, Mike, through now St. Louis, Atlanta, the 4th series he's been doing this now. It's unbelievable, this run.
It is, and it's a different dynamic, Rob, a little bit than Foles, right? Because Foles was such an underdog story. He had been the starter. He had thought about retiring. Now he was the backup. The whole team was underdogs, and here he is, lighting it up in the NFC Championship game and outplaying Tom Brady. Well, not quite outplaying Tom Brady, but beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. Harper is the guy who's supposed to do this, right? And that almost makes it more unbelievable in a strange way, that he is consistently meeting the measure of every moment, right? Like I said, the home run against the Padres, the home run last night, it's like, boy, wouldn't it be cool if he hit a home run here and then he does it? It's almost like, it's like Roy Hobbs in The Natural or something like that there ought to be like this orchestral music in the background every time he comes to bat. You don't often see that. A guy who is supposed to be that great, who is at his best in these moments that matter most. And we're seeing this out of him. And I think a lot about the fact that he was such a prodigy as a youngster, as a teenager. And on the one hand, you can say, well, he's been in big moments his entire life, right? When you're 12 or 13 and you're playing with 16, 17-year-olds, man, that's really tough. And that's going to prepare you for what's going to come down the pike when you do get to the major leagues. But the flip side of that is, man, we see a lot of prodigies who burn out, who don't make it, who flame out and never live up to the hype and, struggle to live normal lives. And this guy seems like he has matured. He figured it out. He wants to be here. And man, he is delivering in a way that I don't know that we've seen a Philadelphia superstar deliver like this in a long time.
No. Well, the other part of this improbable journey is the manager, right? Who, I think most Phillies fans would have said, what is he, the bench coach? The Thompson? I don't know. I know he's been around. He was with the Yankees. He's a Girardi guy, but really didn't know the whole story of this guy. Just a lifer and sticking around the game. Thought he was never going to get a chance, even though he thought he was qualified. He gets his chance, and here we are. And not only that, Mike, I think in virtually every series, he's managing circles around the opposing manager.
I agree with you completely, Rob. You know, it's funny. You see Rob Thompson in these interviews, you see his demeanor, and he's so reserved, kind of self-deprecating, and yet he makes decisions in each of these games like his rear end is on fire. Yeah. And that's how you have to manage in the baseball playoffs. It is the big difference between him and Dusty Baker in this series right now. It is. It's Baker left Justin Verlander in too long in game 1. He left McCullers in too long in game 3. And the Phillies just thumped those guys. And Thompson has shown no compunction about, hey, if this guy doesn't have it, I'm getting him out of there. And I'll get somebody else in there. And I will make the moves needed to win today. I am not worrying about anything else down the pipe. The only time he didn't do that was in game 2 against the Padres when he left Nola in a little bit too long and Brad Hand in a little bit too long, and it burned him, and he hasn't done it since.
Yeah.
Mike, how shocked are you that Thompson, when you think about how long he had been a part of the game, had never had an opportunity to be a manager before? And I know the Phillies will never admit this, but I would imagine they went into this thing thinking, okay, he'll be the Band-Aid on what we're going through right now until we decide what we want to do at the end of the season. And lo and behold, they have, I don't even like to put him in a category of diamond in the rough, because he has already elevated himself as one of the best strategists in the game in a short amount of time he's been at the helm.
Yeah, the strategy's been great, Gunner, and I think his demeanor, and I keep using this term, but I think it really applies, like the work environment he creates.
Yeah.
I think franchises in pro sports sometimes can overthink things when it comes to who their coach is, who their manager is. You know, you can go to the lengths of like hiring a guy like Gabe Kapler, who, you know, is a fine manager, but really talks about these things from kind of a lofty sort of perspective, when all you need is somebody who trusts the people who are working under him and puts them in position to be at their best. And I don't think there's any doubt that Rob Thompson does that for this team. His personality and his demeanor and the way he goes about things, those factors were what this team needed to succeed and thrive on a day-to-day basis. And now you have the strategy. The fact that all the decisions he's making are right or turning out to be right is only increasing the confidence and trust that his players have in him.
Well, so Mike, what's your sense? I mean, look, they still need to win 2 more games, you know, and while everybody's feeling great, this is a phenomenal Astros team. And you have a guy in Christian Javier who's, you know, formidable to say the least. And it's going to be a challenge. Do the Phillies finish them off in your estimation? And ultimately, how many games do you think it takes?
You know, Rob, I had picked the Astros in 6 at the start of the series. I thought that they wouldn't be intimidated by Citizens Bank Park's atmosphere in the way that the Phillies' previous opponents had been. After last night, you know, that was striking to me, that they just kind of didn't show up, you know, that they couldn't string anything together. And the thing we haven't talked about yet, guys, is that the Phillies shut them out last night with Ranger Suarez and, you know, the bunch of guys who, Kyle Gibson, bunch of guys who you wouldn't have thought would necessarily have pitched unless the Phillies needed them to eat innings or Rob Thompson absolutely needed those guys to pitch. Well, guess what? He didn't. And now tonight you have Nola, you have Sir Anthony Dominguez, you have Zach Eflin. You can probably go back to Jose Alvarado. You have David Robertson. It would surprise me at this point if we went back to Houston. Again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but it would really surprise me if the Astros pulled out one of these 2 games.
I'm just trying to. I never knew baseball to be a sport in which crowd noise and how the crowd is would directly impact the team. These teams like this crowd here, man. Is it that big? I mean, I know in football it has a dramatic effect on the opposing team because you can't hear anything, you know, whatever. But how is it so different in baseball, and it's become a definite factor here in Philadelphia?
My theory, Barrett, is that there aren't as many ballparks, if any, anymore, where crowd noise is any factor at all. You know, it used to be, you know, Fenway Park would be rabid. Yankee Stadium would be rabid. I'm not sure those environments exist as much anymore. You definitely see it in the NFL. You know, certainly with places like the Superdome or other dome stadiums or Seattle, where whatever's kind of part of the structure of the stadium contributes to the noise. This is different. This is 46,000 people screaming their lungs out on virtually every pitch. And teams don't see that anymore in baseball. Rarely, if ever.
Right.
You know, Tom Verducci referenced the Metrodome in the 1987 and 1991 World Series as being the loudest place he's ever been in for a baseball game. You're going back more than 30 years for something that's comparable to this.
Mhm.
And so I think if that crowd is not screaming and seething for you as a Phillies player, it makes it that much harder to go out there and perform, because these guys are that much more aware of it because they're not used to it.
All right, Mike. Awesome, man. Awesome.
Thank you, brother.
Great stuff. We're looking
Thanks,
forward
guys.
to your story after tonight's game as well. Check it out, inquirer.com and at Mike Sielski. Mike, looking forward to it. You're on Saturday with Glenn?
I will be on Saturday if I'm not in Houston. If the Phillies finish this off, I will be on Saturday.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks,
Appreciate
man.
it, bro.
I'm going to watch the rest of the program for Gunner to turn it loose on you guys. See ya.
D-Gun's happy Mike Sielski was on.
All right. Speaking of, we just keep it rolling, man. We come back, the one and only Ricky Vitalico. Don't go anywhere. Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network.